Hey guys, it's your boy, Ballface8020, back again with another great commentary. I'm going to try to be brief here. So it looks like the Eagles are going to be bringing back Nick Sirianni. Now, as we've discussed before, the Philadelphia Eagles have the worst fan base in all of sports. They're the gayest team in all of sports. Second gayest team is the Detroit Lions. Are the Lions fans the second gayest? I don't know. You'd think probably one of the New York teams would have gayer fans than the Lions, but the Lions are certainly up there. But anyway, so, obviously, fuck the Eagles. I don't want them to do well. But there's, criticism that I'm reading, because a lot of people, a lot of the Eagles fans even, don't want Nick Sirianni back, understandably, with the way the season ended. And I thought, the Eagles season was so bad, so horrendous, that initially I was thinking Sirianni has to be fired. Just because, I'm not saying it even because I don't like the guy, but even if I thought he was a good coach, I was saying that was so bad you have to fire him and start fresh. It looks like the Eagles are going to keep him. And after I've had some time to reflect on it, I really think they're making the right decision. And the reason I think that is because it has to do with the way that the Philadelphia Eagles organization operates, which is somewhat unique in the NFL. In the NFL, there are basically two different ways of running an organization. One is where you have a very strong, coach, a coach who just really runs everything. And this is the guy who will, he doesn't just run the football team, the football program, but he's also the guy who makes the bulk of the personnel decisions. Or often, he has final say or exclusive say on personnel decisions. Certainly, Belichick was like that before he was fired. Andy Reid, when he coached in Philadelphia, had a similar situation. Pete Carroll, similar type of thing in Seattle. You've had guys like this, and and then there's another the other way, which seems becoming more popular, is you'll have a very strong GM, and sometimes this will lead to power struggles, but this the biggest examples of this of the very strong GM who the coach does his thing, but when it comes to personnel, the GM runs the show. So currently Kansas City now, that's how it is that. Reid has a lot of input. They try to do stuff with consensus, but it's not Reid's. Reid does not have final say. And another great example would be somebody or places like Baltimore or Pittsburgh. Those are the two models you really see, either strong coach who runs everything, and that's not most places, but they do still exist, and then strong coach or maybe not even necessarily strong coach, but strong GM, where the GM has a lot of control or total control or near total control over personnel. The coach has input maybe, but that's as deep as it goes. And say some organizations are more extreme about that. The GM in places like Pittsburgh or Baltimore is very strong. The coach has input, but that's it. There's no power struggle at all because the coach just doesn't have final say. The final say, it comes from the GM. Some places it's a little bit more balanced. There's more give and take. And that's probably most places. But those are and I've just mentioned there's the other extreme where the coach kind of runs the show. Andy Reid when he was in Philly, Belichick. Okay, so we've rehashed all that. The Eagles are somewhat unique in that they don't really fit either of those models. And they're not in between it either, because for the Eagles, it might seem they're one of the strong GM things, like Howie Roseman runs the front office, and he has got final say on free agency, draft, whatever. And Nick Sirianni, the coach, is sort of shut out of that. And that part is true. What's different about the Eagles and the only other organization is I can think of is the Cowboys, where that the GM's power and also the owner's power doesn't stop with personnel. It extends, it's personnel or contracts and stuff. It extends into coaching decisions, like coaching staff even, and how players are used and who's going to play, and even the game plan, along with just stuff like interactions with like how team players interact with the media and stuff like that. Like those are like a final say when it comes to coaching stuff in Philadelphia is not Nick Sirianni. It's Howie Roseman and Jeff Lurie, the GM and the owner. And so with that being the case, you aren't necessarily looking for the same thing for a head coach in the Philadelphia Eagles that you are for other teams, because what's likely the case is that Nick Sirianni has probably the least power of any head coach in football. Like he doesn't have authority on which coaches are going to be on his staff. He doesn't have authority over his staff, and he doesn't really have authority over his game plan. He's the head coach, but his coordinators were not picked for him. I mean, he maybe had some input, but his coordinators, the Eagles today hired what's the guy's name? Fangio to be their defensive coordinator. They're going to hire somebody else to be their offensive coordinator. Those guys, when they get the job, they're not going to be hired by Nick Sirianni. They're going to be hired by Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie. They're going to be reporting directly to Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie. They're going to be given a free hand to run Fangio is going to be allowed to run the defense the way he wants, and whoever is the offense coordinator is going to be given authority to run the offense the way he wants. So technically, Nick Sirianni, I mean, he's the head coach. He's still the boss, but in a very unusual way for coaches really at any level of football, because final say doesn't rest with him for anything. So while Nick Sirianni's title is head coach, in practice, what he has is a sort of a middle management position. And this is a position that he has shown himself to be competent in the past. I mean, so you might ask, well, what does he even do? Well, what he does is the administrative nuts and bolts middle management stuff. That's what he's going to be doing. When it comes to actually making offensive game plans, he's not going to be involved. When it comes to making defensive game plans, he's not going to be involved. When it comes to figuring out how to actually run practices, he's not going to be involved. He's going to be the point man that stuff gets run through, or at least some stuff gets run through. But in terms of actual authority to make those final decisions, he's going to have some, but it's going to be very limited, more than in any other team in the league. And the thing is, for that, you don't really necessarily need to be the world's smartest guy. So for that, you just need to be somebody who can do that stuff, is willing to do that stuff, and and is and he has some things going for him. He's got an almost childlike enthusiasm and passion. And for a position like that, for a guy who doesn't have a lot of power, what else would you really ask for? He's kind of like one of those he functions as kind of one of the managers that professional wrestlers have, functions as kind of a hype man for the team. And again, in addition to what I said, the sort of behind the scenes managerial stuff, sort of the grunt work, and being the guy who has to do the focal point with the media. So if anybody who's asking, well, what does he do? Well, he does a lot. He's the guy who deals with the media. He's the guy who's the face of the coaching. He's not necessarily, even if he's not actually making all the decisions. And he's the guy who's going to be the point of contact with the media, with the players, with the fans, and the go-between for all the moving parts of the organization. Or maybe, that might be kind of exaggerating. He's not going to be coordinating that stuff. Mostly it's going to be, Howie Roseman and Jeff Lurie running it. like in a fairly top down fashion. But he's going to be part of that. And in addition to offering his, his input, which probably isn't going to be taken too seriously, but it is still going to be there. So it's a very different way of coach. It's different than the norm of coaching. And I think, instinctively, fans or observers kind of recoil from that. They're like, well, that's not what we want a head coach to do. That's not traditionally how a head coach operates. True, but the Eagles have had a lot of success with this model. In the last 6 years, they've made it to 2 Super Bowls. They've won one of them. They have, developed some really good players. Yes, the end of this season was bad, like really bad, but that was due to some of that was just how things go. Some of that was due to mistakes that they made that they likely won't repeat, like replacing your defensive coordinator in the middle of the year. So, initially, I was really skeptical of it, but once you understand that the Eagles just do things differently as an organization, I think that there's actually a lot of room to be optimistic from the coaching perspective of next year. The thing is, a lot of the problems the Eagles had this year on both sides of the ball were due to coordinators. I think, you can exaggerate the importance of coaching. I think it does get exaggerated, but switching defensive coordinators mid-season destroyed the defense. And so, you're bringing in a guy who's as good a defensive coordinator as it is. I can't promise there'll be great results, but absolutely, I can be certain they'll be much better than they were last year, or at the end part of last year. And then offensively, I think there was enough to see that the offense last year wasn't competent. I mean, the sportscasters were commenting, saying the routes didn't make sense. You had multiple cases of receivers running to the same spot on the field. It wasn't even a high school offense. These were just poorly designed plays. So just returning, some competence there should open stuff up. And so I don't think the Eagles are going to be a Super Bowl contender next year. I think that they're a ways away from being that good again. But I do think the Eagles model has shown to have success. I think it can have more success going forward. And I don't see any reason why Nick Sirianni isn't a great fit for what they're doing in Philadelphia. That's all for now, and I'll see you in the next.